My wife was cheating on me. I found out when I opened a site and saw her there, so I bought a subscription. I don't normally spend time on adult platforms, but one random night in August, I not only browsed through one, but also ended up paying for their premium membership. I figured 85 wasn't too steep. I was watching a live stream featuring an enticing woman, and even though I'd seen more impressive shows, something about this one struck a chord. They called her Fiery Homemaker Cindy, but I knew her real name was Sarah. Yes, Sarah was my spouse. After their intimate session, her partner, with a smug look, said, "Well, sweetheart, that was something. I bet your partner can't make you feel this way, can he?" Sarah, keeping her cool, shot back, "Well, Tony, it was fun, but no one sets me on fire like my husband. I've been with a few men, but none of them make me as happy as he does. You're good, but he's incredible, so keep trying." She gave him a sly smile. Puzzled, Tony asked, "If he's so great, why are you here cheating on him?" Sarah's smile didn't waver as she replied, "I didn't plan this, but I enjoy the thrill. I'm glad you're part of it. Plus, I can get away with it, and hell never find out. I love my husband with all my heart. It makes me appreciate him even more. That 85 was worth every penny because I found out what my wife was up to without needing to hire private detectives." You might be curious how I ended up on that site in the first place. It's a fair question, and the truth is, it was just a strange stroke of luck. Not lucky that Sarah was with Tony, but lucky that I discovered her cheating. Sarah and I have been married for over 9 years. We first met as kids in elementary school in a small town in northern Indiana. She lived in town, and I lived in the countryside. Her dad owned the largest grain elevator around, and my dad ran the biggest grain farm. Naturally, since our parents did business together, we met, went to school together, and became friends. I won't bore you with tales of childhood crushes or college romances. We both dated other people over the years. We hadn't been exclusive. But deep down, I think we always knew we were meant to be together. I was her first, but we both had others along the way. It was during our junior year at Purdue University that we decided to be exclusive. A year and a half later, just after graduation, we got married. We both earned degrees in business administration. Life was great, or so I thought, until that August night 3 years ago. Sarah's parents retired and moved to Miami, Florida. Sarah, her sister Lisa, and her brothers Jack and Matt bought 49 of the grain business from their dad. He wanted to keep control for a while to support their growth financially, but eventually, he let them own it outright. Lisa is married to a friend of mine, Ryan Anderson, another grain farmer. He manages a farm just slightly smaller than mine. We live nearby and often hang out together. Jack and Matt run the grain business while Sarah handles the finances. Lisa works there too, dealing with customers and managing grain sales. It's a real family operation with a few extra employees for trucking and grain handling, hired part-time during peak seasons. That's enough backstory. Let's get into how I caught my wife with another man online, and what happened next. The Mitchell siblings worked hard to finalize the deal for the grain business. I wasn't heavily involved, but I knew they had to put in a lot of effort. They had meetings with banks, the Indiana Department of Agriculture, insurers, and more. They were exhausted by the end. Fortunately, this was all during winter, their slow season. For me, it was post-harvest, so I didn't need Sarah's help on the farm as much as during planting or harvesting. She didn't do farm work, but managing 1,800 acres of corn and soybeans kept me busy, and I relied on her for errands and various tasks. Since things weren't hectic, Sarah and Lisa decided to take a few days off at a spa to relax. They booked a 3-night getaway and came back refreshed. They liked it so much, they planned another spa weekend in August, once planting was over. It was during this trip that I stumbled upon the online video. Michael Blake, an agent from the Indiana Department of Agriculture in our county, stopped by during a routine visit. Sarah and I had known Michael since college, and when he asked about her, I mentioned she was at a spa. Michael gave me a strange look and hinted that something shady was going on there. He mentioned a cousin who worked there as a masseuse and had heard scandalous stories about the place. He suggested I check it out online. I enjoy browsing the internet, so that evening, I decided to dig around and eventually found the spa. It didn't take long to find the live feed, and then the show began. I could recount the events of that night, but what's the point? I went through a storm of emotions: hurt, tears, anger, and depression, all the typical reactions of a man discovering his wife's betrayal. Soon I found out this wasn't her first time cheating because the spa had an archive section. With my premium membership, I accessed videos from their previous 2 visits and from the 2 recent nights Sarah and Lisa had been there. For an extra $30 per video, I downloaded 8 videos, costing me $240 on top of the original $85. With 325 total, I had all the evidence I needed to file for divorce. I just hadn't figured out my plan yet, but I knew I had to act fast. I wasn't going to wait a month, 2 weeks, or even a week. The sooner we separated, the better. I had video proof of her being intimate with another man at least 8 times. In fact, she had been with 2 different men, Tony and Steve, in the videos I downloaded. I didn't know, and frankly didn't care if there had been more than 2 was more than enough. I made several DVD copies of the videos and stored them securely. When my father built our house, he installed a wall safe behind a hidden panel in the office of his built-in bookcase. Once the copies were safely hidden, I deleted all references to the spa from my computer and erased the original files. Aside from the DVD copies, there was no longer a trace of the evidence. With everything sorted, I picked up my phone and sent a text to Sarah. Sarah, this is Alex. I know exactly what you're doing at the spa, and I have evidence to prove it. Don't bother returning to the house. This house is no longer your home, and soon I won't be your husband. We're done. My lawyer will contact you in the next few days. Arrangements can be made for you to collect your belongings at that time. It seems Sarah had her phone off and didn't get my message until the next morning, as I didn't hear from her that night. But early the following day, my phone started ringing. Seeing Sarah's name on the caller ID, I chose not to answer. She left a voicemail. Alex, what on earth are you talking about? I have no idea what's going on. Lisa and I are packing up now and we'll be home in a couple of hours. I don't understand what you think I did, but you're mistaken. I'll talk to you when I get there and we can sort this out. I love you, Alex. Shortly after, my phone rang again. Ignoring it, I let it go to voicemail. It was essentially the same message, almost word for word. I wondered if she had rehearsed what to say when I didn't pick up. Then came another text, repeating nearly the same lines from her calls. Since I didn't need to have an actual conversation with her, I replied briefly via text. I wonder if Tony would have any idea about what in the world you're talking about, honey. Why don't you have him call me and I'll ask him? As for coming back to the house, I meant it. Don't. It's over, Sarah. I didn't get more texts, but later that afternoon she called again, leaving a message. Alex, we need to talk. I'm staying with Lisa until we can have a conversation and resolve this terrible misunderstanding. Please call me. The next morning, I went to my bank and set up a second safe deposit box in my name alone. I placed one copy of the DVDs in that box, along with the original prenuptial agreement. I also made an extra copy of the prenuptial agreement. I had a meeting with my lawyer scheduled for 1100 a.m., and while I was confident he already had a copy, I didn't want to leave anything to chance. When I arrived at my lawyer's office, I was surprised to see Sarah already there. She looked disheveled, her eyes red from crying and her hair a mess. Alex, we need to discuss this, she said. I asked, how did you know I had an appointment here? She replied, Julian called me when you set up the meeting. Just then, Julian Monroe, my attorney, came out and invited both of us into his office. My anger simmered beneath the surface as I said, No, Julian, we won't be going into your office together. Your call to Sarah has shattered my trust. I need a clear answer now. Will you represent me and only me? Lawyers are supposed to be smart, but it seemed Julian missed out on his fair share of brains. He said, No, Alex, if this continues, I will be representing Sarah. He considered the grain business a better client than my farming business, probably due to his representation of the Mitchell family members. I had my own thoughts on this, believing he'd eventually see the mistake in his judgment. Fine, Julian. Ensure all my original documents and any available copies of contracts and paperwork are ready by 4 p.m. today. I will either pick them up myself or arrange for a courier. Understand that I've appreciated your past work, but you're making a significant error here. I'll be seeking legal services elsewhere, and my new attorney will contact you soon. Sarah remained silent during this exchange, but then pleaded, Alex, why won't you talk to me now to clear this up? I replied, Because, Sarah, it's evident Julian values you more as a client than me. I won't engage without legal representation, and I don't trust him. Julian interjected, Alex, you know I've always been straightforward with you. You have nothing to fear. In my mind, I thought, "Oh, Julian, I have plenty to fear. You can serve two masters, and it's clear who you've chosen. Goodbye. My attorney will be in touch," I declared, and walked out, hearing Sarah start to cry again. Darn it. Now I had to find a new attorney. I knew Samuel Watson was a highly skilled attorney with a fierce competitive streak against Julian Monroe, so I figured he might be a good option. However, I didn't want to rush into anything without doing my homework. Lawyers, like accountants, bankers, and insurance agents, are professionals you have to choose carefully, especially since they handle confidential information. Knowing a few people who had used Samuel's services, I called his law office and asked for a list of references. The secretary, who introduced herself as Angela, was happy to email it to me. On the list, I saw the names of 4 friends. I decided to visit 3 of them to get their take on Samuel's work. It didn't take long. All 3 gave glowing recommendations. Confident in Samuel's abilities, I skipped the 4th friend, Ryan, because he was married to Lisa, Sarah's sister, and I didn't want to involve him. I called Samuel's office again, introduced myself, and asked for an appointment after 3:30 p.m. The receptionist said he was booked until 4:30, but would check if he could squeeze me in. When she got back on the line, she confirmed he could see me at 4:30 for a brief meeting. I agreed and mentioned I'd arrive a bit early. She replied, "Great, Mr. Davis, see you then." At 4 p.m. I stopped by Julian's office to collect my paperwork, but they were still copying it. It was clear they were stalling, probably hoping I'd reconsider. Frustrated, I demanded they finish within 15 minutes or my new attorney would contact them. They asked who it was, and I said they'd find out soon enough. Suddenly the office was bustling, and 20 minutes later, I had all my documents. I arrived at Samuel's office on time and met with him. He agreed to be my personal and business attorney. I asked if I could leave my paperwork with him for safekeeping, and he agreed, storing it in his vault. We scheduled a meeting for the next morning to review everything and plan my divorce. When I left the office, Angela smiled and asked if she was causing any delays in my evening plans. I laughed and said, "Not at all, Angela. Everything's on track." She replied, "Glad to hear it, Alex." The next morning, we reviewed my business paperwork. I can't discuss specifics due to attorney-client privilege, but Samuel said everything looked in order. We paused for lunch, and Samuel and Angela invited me to join them at a local diner. I agreed, needing to stop by the bank afterward. Lunch was pleasant, and I learned more about them. They'd been married for 12 years and had 2 young daughters. They showed me pictures of their charming girls who clearly took after their mom with their beautiful smiles. The lunch was good for me, helping ease into the new attorney-client relationship. However, it also reminded me of what I'd lost. Samuel and Angela's dynamic was a painful reminder of how things had been with Sarah. I felt sad and teared up a couple of times. Samuel didn't seem to notice, but Angela did, and I saw concern on her face. After lunch, I went to the bank to secure my assets and got a $6,000 check made out to Samuel Watson Law Offices as a retainer. Samuel hadn't asked for it yet, but I thought it was a good gesture. Returning to the office, I was ready to continue. Angela informed me Samuel was on a call and led me to a small conference room. She asked if I wanted coffee, and I declined. She sat beside me and said, "Alex, Samuel didn't share specifics, but I can sense this is about your wife. If it's okay with you, I'd like to join your meeting. Sometimes a woman's perspective can help." On the brink of breaking down again, I nodded. It felt comforting to have Angela's empathy. I recounted the painful story of discovering Sarah's infidelity. I broke down a few times, and Angela offered her support and sympathy. After regaining control of my emotions, I laid out my intentions clearly. Unless something changed my mind, I planned to file for divorce and enforce the terms of our prenuptial agreement. Samuel and I went through the prenuptial agreement in detail. Essentially, it stated that I retain 100% ownership of all farm assets, real estate, and personal property, while Sarah retains 100% ownership of the grain business assets. If there was no infidelity, Sarah was entitled to 50% of our financial assets. However, if infidelity was proven, she would only receive $35,000 for each year of unfaithfulness, and I would receive $280,000 for each year of infidelity instead of 50. Samuel asked if I had evidence of the infidelity. I told him I did, but wouldn't reveal it unless absolutely necessary for court. I emphasized that I didn't want anyone else to see what I had seen unless it was essential. Angela, who had been sitting quietly, touched Samuel's arm and nodded in agreement. Reluctantly, Samuel accepted my decision. Over the next few days, Sarah made several phone calls and left numerous voicemails, but I didn't answer or listen to any of them. Samuel then informed me we had a meeting scheduled for Thursday with Sarah, Julian, Samuel, and myself. During that meeting, I planned to ask Sarah some critical questions, and her responses would determine if I went through with the divorce and on what grounds. Thursday at 10:30 a.m., Samuel and I arrived at Julian's office. Sarah's car was already in the parking lot. We were guided to a small conference room where we waited for a few minutes before Julian and Sarah joined us. Sarah looked much better than she had earlier in the week. She had clearly made an effort to look nice. She smiled and said, "Alex, I hope we can finally talk and clear up this misunderstanding. I miss you and want to come home." I didn't reply, fearing my voice would betray my emotions. Samuel started the meeting. "We're here to discuss the divorce process for Alex and Sarah. Both parties should express their thoughts and opinions on how to move forward." Julian added, "My client believes this is all a big misunderstanding and is eager to resolve these issues with her husband." My anger, which had been simmering, flared up. It helped me control my emotions, making it easier to handle the hurt and disappointment I felt towards Sarah. "That works for me, Julian," I said. "Your client can talk to her husband." I turned to Sarah and continued, "Here are the facts. When we got married, we signed a prenuptial agreement, which we updated 2 years ago when you joined your father's business. I've brought copies of the updated agreement for everyone." Sarah seemed a bit shocked, but remained quiet. Our intention was to protect our individual interests while enjoying the benefits of our marriage. Initially, the agreement was to safeguard assets in my family for generations. When you joined your father's business, it was also to protect your family's assets. In case of a divorce, the agreement is clear. I keep 100 of my family's assets, and you keep 100 of your family's assets. Any debts related to these assets belong to the respective business. Personal belongings like clothing, jewelry, and your car are yours, and mine are mine. Household personal property is divided equally. Farm property like grain bins and machinery remains entirely mine. I paused before addressing the financial division. In a divorce, you would get 50 of our assets if there was no infidelity. However, if infidelity is involved, the terms change. If you divorce me due to infidelity, I would receive $280,000 per year, not 50. If I divorce you for infidelity, you get $35,000 per year, not 50. Taking a deep breath, I asked Sarah, "I'm going to ask you some questions. Your answers will determine if I proceed with the divorce and on what grounds. This will also affect the financial settlements. If you want to save our marriage, you must answer truthfully. If you refuse or lie, it's over. Do you understand? Are you willing to do this?" Sarah, visibly shocked by the details of the prenuptial agreement, quickly regained her composure. "Yes, Alex, I will answer your questions honestly. I love you and want our marriage to survive. I'll do whatever it takes to make this right and come back home. Sarah, I'd like to record these questions. Is that okay with you?" She hesitated briefly and turned to Julian, who had been mostly silent until now. Julian, being the typical lawyer, said, "Sarah, I would advise against it, but you should do what you think is best for you." My lawyer Samuel added, "I agree with Julian. I wouldn't recommend recording this, but it's Alex you need to convince, not us. Do what you feel is right." Sarah replied, "I'll do anything to fix this misunderstanding. Yes, go ahead and record it. I'm okay with it." Samuel and I set up a tape recorder on the table to capture everything. Sarah asked what my questions were, and I explained I wanted to ask about her faithfulness divided into 3 time periods. First, from the time we committed to being exclusive until we got engaged. I asked if she had been faithful during that time. Sarah smiled and said she had been, but I pointed out her lie, marking it as lie number 1. Her smile vanished. I told her I nearly walked out right then but decided to stay. "Do you remember an encounter with David Fisher 2 days after we promised exclusivity? David had bragged about visiting you when your parents were away and being intimate with you in your bed. Lisa had overheard and assured me you loved me and wouldn't cheat again, urging me not to act rashly. Although I didn't like it, I let it slide but warned you there would be no more passes, and you needed to be honest from now on." I continued, saying I didn't trust her after that incident, so I monitored her closely for 6 months. She didn't raise any suspicions, so I proposed and gave her the ring she was wearing. I acknowledged she might have wanted it sooner, but I wasn't ready to fully trust her, so she had to wait. Next, I asked if she had cheated during our engagement from receiving the ring until our wedding day. Without hesitation, she said, "No, absolutely not." I expected that answer and believed it was true because I still didn't fully trust her. I mentioned I had continued to keep an eye on her until I felt confident in her loyalty. Julian, noticing Sarah's emotional state, suggested a break. He wanted to talk to his client and give her time to collect herself. Both he and I noticed she was on the brink of breaking down. We decided to break for lunch. Samuel and I picked up Angela, and we headed to the local diner for the Blue Plate special. Angela asked how things were going, and Samuel replied, "Alex is holding up. He's laid the groundwork for honest answers about their marriage. If Sarah confesses everything, he might still consider divorce, but he could also see she genuinely wants to save the marriage. It'll be tough, but he can handle it. Of course, if she lies, Alex will have to decide how to proceed." Angela looked at me and sensed my pain. I managed a weak smile and said, "This is incredibly tough. Why do people make such foolish choices, causing pain to themselves and those they love?" She placed her hand on mine and said, "If only we could know, Alex. We'd give them a reality check before they made those foolish choices." That actually made me laugh, as did Samuel. Even during these trying times, I found a way to laugh. It's a testament to human resilience. People grieve at funerals but also find moments to laugh. I suppose it's the same with divorces. Amidst the grief, there can still be room for laughter. I grinned at Angela and said, "Thanks, Angela. I really needed that." She nodded, smiling back. Shortly after 1 p.m., we returned to Julian's office to continue. Before I asked the next question, I reminded Sarah, "You must answer these questions with complete honesty. If you lie, it'll be the end of this meeting, and our marriage will have no chance. Do you understand?" Sarah replied, "Yes, I understand, and I'll tell you the truth. From the day we got married until now, did you ever cheat on me?" Tears welled up in her eyes, and my heart ached for her. I knew this was painful, but I needed her to care enough to confess everything. I didn't know if I could prevent the divorce, but if she told me the complete truth, at least I'd know she wanted to try and save our marriage. "Yes, Alex, I did cheat on you. I'm so sorry, Alex. Can you ever forgive me?" I asked Julian and Samuel to leave the room because I had more questions for Sarah and didn't want to embarrass her. They objected, but I insisted, and Sarah nodded to Julian that she wanted him to leave as well. I had her confession of cheating on tape, enough for a divorce hearing. I didn't want the rest of my questions and her answers on tape, so I turned it off. "Sarah, when, where, who, and why?" She sniffled a few times and said, "Oh, Alex, I'm so sorry. It happened this weekend at the spa. I cheated with one of the masseurs named Tony. I don't know why it happened, Alex. I guess it was a moment of passion." Lisa and I had a great day, and after a wonderful dinner, we decided to get a massage before bed. My masseur was Tony. I was lying on my stomach, and Tony began the massage. His hands felt soft and strong, and I didn't stop him. At that moment, I had no idea things would go so far. She started crying and said, "Oh, Alex, if I could go back, I never would have allowed it, and we wouldn't be where we are now. You have to believe me." I was shocked but said, "This is shocking, Sarah. I am so sorry, and I don't know what to say." She sat in silence, looking down and sniffling. After a while, she looked up and asked, "Alex, is there any hope that you will forgive me?" Without making it sound like a courtroom, I asked, "Sarah, is this the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?" She looked at me with a mixture of confusion and apprehension, trying to gauge how much I really knew. Finally, she said, "Yes, Alex, that's what happened. I'm so sorry." My heart felt like it was being torn apart, but I managed to conceal the pain and anger. I kept my composure, stood up, and signaled for Samuel and Julian to return. Once they were back, I firmly stated, "This meeting is over. Here's what happened next." After that, I walked towards the door but then turned back to address Sarah. "Sarah, I'm filing for divorce based on infidelity, and the terms of our prenuptial agreement will be enforced." She looked shocked and pleaded, "But why, Alex? I confessed to my infidelity, and I'm begging you to forgive me and continue our marriage. Please, Alex, please, I love you so much. Please forgive me." I replied, "Sarah, you lied to me. You didn't care enough about our marriage to be completely honest. If you had been, I might have considered working things out, but you didn't even give it a chance. You had the opportunity to come clean, but you chose to lie. I know you were unfaithful more than just that one time with Tony, and I have the evidence. I warned you to tell the truth, and you didn't care enough about me or our marriage to do so. It's over. I turned back to the door, opened it, and began walking away. Sarah screamed, "Wait, Alex! I'll tell you everything you want to know. Please don't leave me." I turned around one last time, glaring at her with a mix of hurt and anger, and said, "You were warned. You had your chance, and thought you could get away with only admitting to one incident, so you lied. It's over, Sarah." Then I shouted, "It's over." Samuel quickly followed me and caught up as I was getting into my car. He grabbed my arm and asked, "Do you really want to file for infidelity?" "Yes, I do," I replied. "She had her chance. I must have misjudged her all these years. I wanted her to care enough to confess everything, but she couldn't even be honest with me now. Go ahead and file." I drove back to the house, now just mine, and grabbed a beer from the fridge. Actually, I grabbed two. I sat in my office, quickly drank the first one, and sipped the second, contemplating everything that had happened. I had several copies of the video evidence hidden in secure spots, but I didn't think I'd need to make them public since I had her confession. Suddenly, I realized I had left the tape in Julian's office. I immediately called Samuel. "Hey, it's Alex. Did you grab the tape recording of Sarah's confession before you followed me?" "Oh no," he said. "I forgot the tape, Alex. I rushed out after you and completely forgot. I'm so sorry. I had been meticulous in planning everything, and in my moment of hurt and anger, I had stormed out without the tape." "Damn," I muttered. "Samuel, why don't you call Julian and see if you can retrieve it? But my guess is they'll say they erased it." "Sorry, but I'll be surprised if you can actually get it. Don't worry even if you can't. I have enough evidence to file for infidelity anyway." Samuel responded, "Okay, man, I'm sorry. I know you didn't want to use the video downloads, but now you might have to if she contests the infidelity charge." "Don't worry about it, Samuel. Everything will work out," I reassured him. After ending the call, I grabbed another beer from the fridge. Damn, how could I be so careless? I wasn't drunk, just numb, as I watched the evening news. Before heading to bed, I thought I heard a vehicle pull into the yard, so I slowly rose from my chair and went to the back door. Stepping onto the porch, I saw a dark shape just before the lights went out. Something struck me on the back of the head, and then all I saw was blinding light before drifting into total darkness. I woke to the sound of beeping and opened my eyes to look around as best I could without moving. I had learned my lesson from the first time. I saw a nurse sitting beside me. I tried to turn but couldn't move. "Hi, Alex. I'm Emily, your nurse. Please don't try to move, okay? Everything will be fine, and I'll explain everything, but please stay still. Do you understand?" I felt something in my throat but managed to nod slightly. "Alex, I need to tell the doctor you've regained consciousness, and we'll be right back." I nodded again. It became clear I must have been injured and was in the hospital, though I couldn't remember how it happened. I assumed someone would eventually fill me in, so I lay there with my eyes closed until I sensed their presence again. "Mr. Davis or Alex," said Dr. Johnson. "I am Dr. Johnson. You sustained multiple injuries from a beating during a home robbery. Now that you've regained consciousness, I'm confident you'll recover, but we had to restrain you to prevent further injury from sudden movements. I'm sure you felt the intense pain when you tried to move, correct?" I managed a slight smile and nodded. "Yes. We should have been more proactive with the restraints to spare you that pain. I apologize." "Well, remove the restraints now, Nurse Miller. But Mr. Davis, please refrain from any sudden movements. All right?" I nodded and gestured toward the tube in my throat. "Yes, we can also remove the ventilator. Nurse Miller will handle it." They removed the restraints in the tube, causing excruciating pain in my throat. I couldn't speak initially, but after some time, I was given a sip of water and could speak, though my voice was raspy and painful. I whispered, "Could someone please tell me what happened?" Dr. Johnson explained, "Alex, it's 7 a.m. You've just regained consciousness and been taken off the ventilator. Your throat will be sore for a while, so for now, just rest. Nurse Miller will stay with you, and once you've had some time to recover, we'll contact the police so they can talk to you. They can provide all the details of what happened." Dr. Johnson explained medically, "You have a few injuries. The EMTs arrived in time to revive you, and we were able to reinflate your lung. To put it plainly, you've been assaulted. We'll monitor you closely for a few more days, and then you should be ready to go home. I spent the rest of the day resting with Nurse Miller Emily by my side. By late afternoon, I managed to sit up with significant assistance and use the restroom. Emily and I had a chance to chat, and I learned she was a schoolmate from a few years behind me. She was known as Emily Thomas back then, but had married Tom Miller and had a 3-year-old daughter named Emma. Similar to Sarah, Tom had been unfaithful, leading to their divorce. I shared what had been happening with Sarah, and naturally, she was very understanding. The following morning, 2 police detectives, David Brown and Mark Lee, arrived early to visit me. Before they started questioning, I asked them to explain what had happened. Detective Brown began, "It appears this was a robbery that led to an attack on you. We found a 2X4 on the porch with traces of your hair and blood on it. There were no fingerprints, so we assumed the attacker wore gloves. There were no signs of forced entry because you came out onto the porch and the door was already open." He continued, "Inside the house, several pictures were taken off the walls. A strong box in your desk drawer was emptied, and all the filing cabinets were rifled through. In the bedrooms, the drawers and closets were searched, and the jewelry box in the master bedroom was emptied. While it's clear there was a robbery, we're not sure what exactly was taken." Detective Lee added, "Once you're able to return home, you'll need to assess what's missing. The doctor says it might be another 3 or 4 days before you can go home. At that point, we'll go through everything with you to update our reports." Detective Brown then asked, "What do you recall about the attack?" "Not much," I replied. "I'd had a couple of beers and was watching the evening news when I heard a vehicle pull into the yard. I got up to see what was happening, stepped onto the porch, and saw a shadowy figure just before the lights went out. I don't remember anything else until yesterday. I'm afraid I won't be much help in finding who did this." Detective Brown continued, "We need to ask a few more questions to aid our investigation." He inquired about my wife's whereabouts during the incident. I explained that my wife and I were separated and going through a divorce, so I didn't know where she was. He then asked if he could call me Alex, to which I agreed. He asked about the progress of our divorce and if there was significant conflict. I told him it wasn't going well as she was challenging the grounds for divorce. When he asked about the grounds, I said I was filing for infidelity, which would significantly lower her settlement, and she was disputing it. The detective commented that this gave her a motive. "Detective, I just can't believe she'd do anything to harm me," I said. He reassured me they would look into it closely. He asked if there were any other individuals who might want to harm me, or if I had disputes with neighbors, friends, family, or anyone else. I couldn't think of anyone. The detective then mentioned the need to inventory what was missing once I was able, and asked if there was any cash in the house, possibly in the strongbox, and if so, how much. He also asked if there were any valuable items like jewelry or artwork worth thousands of dollars. I told them, yes, there was some cash in the strongbox, about $7,000. I usually keep around $150 in cash on hand, but I had recently withdrawn some, so it was closer to $7,000. There were a few nice pieces of jewelry, but none valued over $1,000. I can't think of anything else of significant value at the moment. I decided not to mention the hidden safe behind the bookcase, as the detective hadn't brought it up, and I wanted to keep it a secret if possible. Detective Brown said, "Well, Alex, that's all for today. If you remember anything else, please call me. When you're ready to return home, let us know so we can do the inventory. If we have more questions, well, visit you here or at home." Over the next 4 days, I gradually improved. I took plenty of naps and chatted with Emily. I had several visitors, including Ryan, Lisa, Samuel, and Angela. Sarah didn't come to see me, and apart from Lisa, none of her family visited either. Given the circumstances, it was understandable, but I would have welcomed the company. Julian, Sarah's attorney, also came to see me. We had been friends for years before the divorce began, and I appreciated his visit. Everyone expressed sympathy for my injury and wished me a speedy recovery. Both Lisa and Angela kissed me on the cheek before leaving, and I saw tears in their eyes. I had a rough time during those 4 days. Even though I slept, I had unsettling dreams. Sometimes I'd wake up feeling panicked, with my heart racing and tears in my eyes. A few times, I woke up disoriented, not knowing where I was, but Emily was always there to comfort me with her gentle words and touches. I'm pretty sure I even woke myself up with a scream once. Though the details of the nightmares escaped me later, I discovered that Emily stayed at the hospital with me, even when she was off duty, only leaving to freshen up and change her clothes each day. She said it was because of the troubles in my marriage, and she wanted to be there for me. I was truly grateful for her support. Dr. Johnson eventually came to inform me that I'd be discharged soon. Relieved, I quickly prepared to leave. Emily helped me get ready and even wheeled me down to the lobby where Ryan and Lisa were waiting to take me home. Emily wished me good luck and gave me a warm hug. I could tell she cared, but with my life in chaos, marriage problems, and health issues, I didn't pursue anything further. I mentioned that I'd like to call her sometime in the future, and that was it. Update upon entering my house, the mess was overwhelming. Ryan and Lisa offered to help clean up, but I told them I'd prefer to leave things as they were until I had a chance to go through everything. I assured them I'd call when I was ready for their help, and they reluctantly agreed, leaving me alone. My first task was to check the safe behind the bookcase in my office. To my relief, everything was intact, including a significant amount of cash, certificates of deposit, stocks, bonds, and the DVD containing evidence of Sarah's infidelity. Clearly, no one had discovered the safe. I inspected the rest of the office and noted that aside from the cash, my laptop and a few numbered prints of Wildlife by Larry Anderson, nothing seemed to be missing. However, I saw bank statements and credit card statements laid out on the desk, so I alerted both the bank and credit card companies to watch for any unusual activity. Over the next few weeks, the investigation into the robbery and assault moved slowly because the police lacked substantial evidence. Detectives Brown and Lee provided regular updates, but no new leads emerged. They explained that the absence of high-value items being stolen made it hard to track down potential culprits. During their last update, they suggested the case might be put on hold unless significant evidence surfaced. Initially, the detectives had questioned me about Sarah and our relationship. I had been mostly cooperative and honest. I strongly believed Sarah wouldn't harm me, and taking items she would receive in the divorce didn't make sense. The detectives seemed to share this perspective, as their inquiries about Sarah didn't lead to anything substantial. To safeguard my finances, I opened new bank accounts and ordered new checks, feeling more secure with these precautions. I also bought a new laptop and reorganized my office, getting back to my routine. As I handled some overdue bills, I found an invoice from Blue Inc. A sudden realization hit me. Blue stood for Remote Electronic Data Storage Solutions. I had video surveillance covering my property, including the house, grain bins, and machine shed. This footage was stored on a computer in my grain office and backed up nightly to Blue's. Normally, I deleted the oldest data each month to manage the storage fees. However, I hadn't deleted anything since the robbery. I had video evidence. Without hesitation, I logged into Blue's website and selected the day of the robbery from their archives. I downloaded the entire day onto my laptop to review it. My hope was that the video quality would be good enough to identify the culprits. If it met my expectations, I planned to create a DVD copy for Detectives Brown and Lee to revive their investigation. As I reviewed the footage, it became clear there was nothing valuable for the detectives, leading me to believe they might not solve the case. With the bills paid, I started planning my future. I decided to reach out to an old college friend who worked at Archer Daniels Midland, one of the largest grain merchandisers in the U.S. Through my connection, I arranged a meeting with key decision-makers in their acquisition department. It was astounding how personal connections could facilitate things. After about 2 weeks, I had finalized my plans with ADM. I also took a brief trip to Las Vegas. I flew to Denver for some business, and then returned home to set my plans in motion. I contacted Samuel and had him arrange a meeting with Sarah, her brothers William and Evan, and her sister Lisa at Mitchell Grain. I instructed him to mention that with the impending divorce, the state's grain reserves might no longer suffice without my grain storage. I wanted to discuss the situation with them and find a resolution. Apparently, Samuel's message surprised them, but they agreed readily to meet. It seemed they hadn't considered the implications of losing my grain. I walked into the office and greeted everyone. "Hello, William, Evan, Lisa, Sarah. I assume you understand why I felt we should sit down and resolve some issues." Will started to speak, but I raised my hand and said, "I initiated this meeting, so I suggest you all listen to what I have to say before making any comments. I genuinely believe it's in everyone's best interest." First, I addressed the divorce. "I apologize, Sarah." I placed the final draft of the divorce papers on the table in front of her. "Please sign these." She responded, "Alex, I don't want a divorce. Whatever you think I did isn't worth throwing away all the good years we've had." I wish you could forgive me and work through our problems. I certainly don't want to do this here in front of my brothers and sister. Sarah, we're going to conclude this now. There's no future for our marriage, and the sooner you sign these papers, the sooner we can both move on with our lives." She blushed and said, "Well, if you insist on divorcing me, I still plan to contest the infidelity issue. It's the least you can do for me." I knew she would play that card, and I was prepared. "If you choose to fight me on the infidelity issue, Sarah, I'll have no choice but to present this DVD as evidence in court." I placed a copy of the DVD on the table alongside the divorce papers. "In case you're wondering, it's a video showing all 8 times you cheated on me at the spa." Lisa's face turned bright red, glaring at Sarah with disbelief and disappointment. "It's true," I confirmed. "Sarah had affairs with Tony and Bradley. I have 8 videos of her with them, which should resolve the infidelity issue." I gave her an ultimatum: sign the divorce papers or face court proceedings, making it clear I was done playing games. William and Evan looked shocked, while Lisa quietly cried. Sarah eventually signed the papers, and I left her a copy, placing the rest in my briefcase. She appeared numb, her eyes filled with unshed tears, clearly shocked at the evidence I had. Moving on to the grain situation, I addressed the group, acknowledging their shock and assuring them I'd be brief despite the unfortunate news. "Due to the divorce, you will no longer have the value of my stored grain included in your reserves, which puts you in violation of your grain license and loan agreements. On a positive note, I have purchased your father's 52% stake in the business. Your agreement with him lacked a first right of refusal clause, making the purchase straightforward. He was aware of the company's need for my equity and believed I had evidence of Sarah's infidelity, making it an easy decision for him. Consequently, I am now the majority shareholder in Mitchell Grain Inc., and each of you owns 12, making you the minority with a 48% stake. I continued, I have negotiated a deal to sell my controlling interest in Mitchell Grain to ADM, a company constantly seeking promising grain operations. You have the option to sell your shares at the same price I negotiated, which I consider favorable. However, the downside is that the company is now owned by someone else, and the new owners will assess personnel to determine their contributions. The upside is that as part of my negotiations, each of you has a 1-year job guarantee. Work hard to prove your worth during that time. I also disclosed that I had sold my farm and Ryan's farm to ADM, with Ryan entering a long-term contract to manage both farms for them, given his excellent performance. The shock on their faces deepened, now mixed with anger. William, being the eldest and unofficial leader of the Mitchell family, was the first to voice his concerns. "What on earth have you done, Alex? You've ruined this family business because my sister cheated on you. What kind of man are you? How did you convince my father to sell you his shares? What lies did you tell him?" "Let me clarify, William," I replied. "Your father sold me his shares to keep you, Evan, and Sarah out of legal trouble. Instead of questioning the kind of man I am, you should be asking yourself what kind of people your siblings are." I placed a second DVD in the center of the table. "This video will provide all the answers you seek about why this is happening. It unmistakably captures your pickup truck in my yard on the night I was assaulted. It clearly shows you and Evan attacking me and exiting my house with my belongings. Consider yourselves fortunate I chose this path of vengeance rather than handing it over to Detectives Brown and Lee." Sarah finally spoke up, expressing her dismay at my actions. I responded, "Our situation is different, Sarah. I feel like I wasted my entire life with you. Your family treated me poorly, and you always had a sense of superiority over me. Despite being my best friend, you were a deceitful partner, promising to be faithful but promptly sleeping with David Fisher. You disrespected me in our marriage by being involved with those men. I witnessed everything on the videos, hearing every word. You almost killed me in that attack, which makes you a terrible friend." Sarah fainted, and Lisa and Evan rushed to her side, catching her before she fell. After she regained consciousness, I delivered my final blow. "Your father sold me his shares to keep all 3 of you out of jail. He wasn't very proud of his children, except for Lisa, and she will hear about it in the future. As I mentioned earlier, I believe I wasted most of my life on you, but I won't waste any more of my future. I wish you a wonderful life." I then left the room, concluding all the negotiations. I felt free to move forward, and that's exactly what I intended to do.